Welcome to the Champs App podcast, where we help players and parents demystify the world of minor hockey development and recruiting for both girls and boys. On today's episode, I talk with Gretchen Silverman, who was recently named the new head coach of the post-University Eagles women's ice hockey program. We discuss her path to becoming an Olympic gold medalist with the 1998 USA women's hockey team. We also cover her experience as a teacher and coach at the Taft School and her plans for the post-women's program. I really enjoyed this conversation with Gretchen, and I hope you do too. Before we start the podcast, I wanted to let you know about the app in Champs App. Champs App lets you create a free, beautiful online hockey resume to share with coaches, teams, and players. Your profile includes all the information coaches want to know to help decide if you are a player they want to keep on their recruiting radar. What makes Champs App unique is that you can then connect directly with college, prep, or team coaches, and they can then follow your updates. So when you add a new highlight video or a game to your schedule, they will automatically get notified of these changes to your profile. It's a really easy way to keep all your connections up to date. Just go to www.champs.app and click the sign up button to start your profile. And check out the links in the show notes to see a list of some of the college coaches already using Champs App that you can connect with. Stay tuned after the episode for more details on how easy it is to create your Champs App hockey resume. I'm very excited to have on the podcast Gretchen Silverman, the new head coach of the post-University Eagles women's ice hockey program. Hailing from Marlborough, Connecticut, Gretchen won gold with the 1998 USA women's Olympic team. And prior to that, she had an amazing career playing at Dartmouth College, averaging almost 3 points per game. In 2013, she began coaching girls prep hockey and teaching at the Taft School, where she was for 9 years. That is, until just a couple of months ago when she was named head coach at Post, which is just a few miles down the road from Taft. So welcome to the podcast, Gretchen.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Hey, thank you so much for doing this. We're going to kick it off like we do all our guests, just asking you how you started playing hockey and a little bit about your hockey history.
So I grew up as the youngest of 5 kids, 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. And, you know, back in the 70s, girls didn't play a lot of sports, but hockey was introduced to my brother. And I ended up getting dragged to the rinks, as many younger siblings do, and saw him playing and just fell in love with the sport right away. So I think I was about 5 years old at the time and pretty much told my parents that when I was 6, which was really when you could start at that time, that I was going to play hockey too. And they didn't really tell me at that point that there were no girls out there. I just didn't really even think about that. And so they actually had to ask permission from the league to see if I could play. And, you know, back then it was right after Title IX. So they knew that they couldn't say no to my parents, but what they did do is try to make them afraid that it was dangerous for me to play. So, you know, they weren't discouraging, but they weren't encouraging either, but they knew that they had to let me play. So at age 6, I started my hockey career.
And do you think that because you were playing with boys, and I'm assuming you really were competitive and wanted to keep up with them, that, you know, that really helped make you a great hockey player?
Oh yeah, I think, you know, I mean, being the youngest of 5, you have to be competitive anyway. And then, you know, being the only girl in an all boys league for most of my childhood, I think I was maybe 10 when I first saw another girl, even as an opponent. And then I think it was after I left the league in Glastonbury, Connecticut, that another girl joined that program.
Gotcha. And I understand there was a certain point where you had to switch from boys to girls because you had a certain incident that you didn't see coming. You want to tell folks about that?
Yeah, well, as a girl I was playing on my brother's bantam team. It was a checking league. And as a girl, I tended to be targeted at times by the opponent. And I went into the boards to retrieve a puck and got crushed from behind. And it was a pretty scary moment. I think probably more for my parents. You know, I was used to getting knocked around, but, you know, I pretty much went headfirst into the boards. My helmet ended up cracked. I'm sure I had a concussion, although that wasn't really something that, you know, was diagnosed at the time. But, you know, it was that moment that we really realized that this was going to be a short-lived thing and that we had to find alternatives.
Gotcha. And for folks who don't know, your stature is not Hillary Knight. You're not almost 6 feet tall. You're according to Elite Prospects, you're only about 5'2", which even by today's standards is still a little bit small.
Yeah, I'm 5'2" and shrinking as we speak.
All right, all right. So you grew up in Marlborough, Connecticut, which is just outside of Hartford. I want to just play for you my ringtone that I've had for about the last 15 years and see if it brings back any memories for you.
I'm sure it does.
What does this sound remind you of?
The Brass Bonanza, Hartford Whalers.
All right, so tell me what that means to you, because I understand, folks like Gordie Howe were playing when you were growing up. So to talk about, having an NHL team nearby, what that meant and how that motivated you to become a player.
Oh yeah, going to games as a family, and again, that was a big deal back then. And with 5 kids, that was a big outing. So my parents would take us every once in a while to the Whalers games, and it was just watching those players, watching Gordie Howe play with his sons. I was a big Dave Keon fan, which probably nobody even knows who that is anymore. But
I remember him from the Maple Leafs. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I absolutely loved watching the Whalers play, and Gordie Howe used to come to our practices. So as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old skating around the ice, all of a sudden Gordie Howe would show up and come out on the ice for an hour with us. And he was famous for turning his stick over on the puck and having 25 kids chase him around the rink trying to get that puck off his stick, and nobody could do it. He was, those memories that I have and just being inspired by him. I was convinced I was going to play for the Hartford Whalers when I grew up.
Wow. And I heard he treated everybody like that. Like he just was, the reason why he was called Mr. Hockey was not a coincidence. That he really made everybody feel special and got them deeply involved in the game of hockey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for him to show up at a mite hockey practice on his day off, who does that anymore? He was just a class act all around.
That's awesome. All right, so let's transition now into you got hit from behind, and it was probably time to go play girls hockey, and then you ended up at the Loomis Chaffee School. So talk about the transition into girls prep school hockey.
Yeah, we thought my career was over at that point. Where I grew up, I didn't know anything about prep school. Nobody really talked about girls hockey. It was like this unknown mystery out there that there even was an opportunity for me to play. So I think it was my mom who was at work. She was a teacher, and talking to another teacher about the fact that, it was sad that I was going to have to stop playing hockey. And that teacher said, well, why aren't you looking at prep schools? There's a school, Loomis Chaffee in Windsor, that has a girls hockey team. And that was really the first time that we knew that was even an option. So my mom gave a call to Chuck Vernon, who was the coach there for a long time and really left his mark on the game. And, kind of the rest is history. I was able to be a day student there. It was about a 45-minute commute, but it was life-changing. I mean, without that opportunity, my hockey career would have ended very quickly.
Wow. So if you still lived at home and were just a day student, you had a lot of car rides back and forth to school and to the rink. And I know this is something that you appreciate in girls hockey. So how did you make use of the time? Because, over the last 3 years, I estimated I put on about 100,000 miles driving my kids to practices and games. And I'm not kidding, it's really 100,000. So how did your parents make use of the time when they were driving you and talking to you in the car?
So actually, my morning ride was from a Windsor high school teacher who lived in our neighborhood, and he would pick me up at about 5:30 every morning, and he and I would chat and talk in the car on the way there. I didn't know him. I knew his kids, but it was just a stranger when we first started commuting together. But he was pivotal in my opportunity to be able to get transportation back and forth, and it just worked out really well. And then usually my dad would pick me up, sometime after sports practices. I was a multi-sport athlete. I played soccer, hockey, and lacrosse at Loomis. And, I can remember rides home. My dad's not a big talker, so, sometimes it was more silent rides, but I can remember I'm still a Patsy Cline fan. That was one of his favorite musicians to listen to. I know our younger people probably don't know who Patsy Cline is, but I still get emotional when I hear Patsy Cline and think about those opportunities to kind of be with my dad and have those rides home.
Gotcha. So while you were at school, and I realize you were playing other sports, but how did your hockey, playing with girls, how did that change during that period of time?
Well, I mean, just the opportunity to play with girls and be on a team. Not that my experience with the boys team was bad. Actually, I had a great experience playing with boys and grew up with a lot of those kids for quite a long time. And most of them became more like my brothers over the years. But having the opportunity to play with other girls who had experienced similar things to me growing up, and just building those relationships and having those friendships that formed out of being on a team like that it was just a different experience and totally rewarding, and having those opportunities to build those bonds.
All right. So how did you end up at Dartmouth? What was that recruiting process like for you back then?
The recruiting process back then was very different than it is now. I really didn't know what I was doing at that point. I, looked at a few schools. I had been in touch with a couple of coaches. I pretty much focused my energies on the Ivies. I was a pretty strong student, and, really liked the idea of being able to go to an Ivy school. When I first started my recruiting process, my best friend had gone on to Yale as a goalie, so I was really convinced that that's where I was headed. But when I went and visited schools, I really fell in love with Dartmouth. And that was kind of a late add to my whole process. So at the point when I was narrowing down schools, I was looking at Princeton, Yale, and Dartmouth. And all it took was a visit to Dartmouth during a winter snowstorm. I got snowed in for a couple extra days and just had an awesome experience there. And the people that I met were so genuine and kind. And, the fact that I got stuck there for a couple extra days, no recruiting violations back then. I didn't have to worry too much about, all the time I spent there. But no, it was just one of those moments where I knew that was my fit. And, when I think about recruiting these days for kids, and even in the process of having kids, come look at Taft while I was there recruiting kids, it's all about the fit and finding your place that you're going to make your mark for 4 years or however long you're there.
And it wasn't too cold for you? Because, I mean, it's pretty cold up there in the winter.
Yeah, well, you spend most of your time in the rink anyway, so.
Gotcha. All right. So you had the most impressive numbers I've ever seen for college hockey. 312 points in 105 games. And I was trying to figure out how the heck you can get almost 3 points per game. But then I went to Elite Prospects, and it all made sense, because according to Elite Prospects, you only had 2 teammates. You had, and both of them were D, and each of them only lasted a year. You had Judy Parrish as a freshman on D, and then I'm going to probably mess up her name, but Amy Colo, who as a senior would play defense. And according to Elite Prospects, you had no one else on your team. So I mean, they had no one else.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So I had great teammates, and I played with Judy Parrish. We crossed over at Loomis as well, and I had great teammates around me. So whether I was getting assists or goals, there was a team effort. I played with Lori Charpentier, who was a longtime coach at Brooks School, and we still remain really close. My son actually went to Brooks School, so got to see her quite a bit over the past 4 years. But I had really strong teammates. Kim Cohen, who was one of my best pals there at Dartmouth. Just great vision, and we just dominated at times.
That's awesome. And you, like, as we mentioned earlier, you're not so tall. So I'm assuming you were incredibly fast. Is that correct? You had some really good hands and some really good speed. Is that a good interpretation of your skill set?
Honestly, if I had to describe my skill set, it would be a grinder. I don't know that I describe myself as fast, and it's hard to put myself in the context of the game now, because the game has changed so much. I'd like to think I was fast, but back then we really didn't do much in the way of time tests or anything like that. But I think my abilities really stem from my ability to see the ice and anticipate and put myself in places where I can be effective. So I was always looking to move and get myself into those gritty areas. I loved my office in front of the net. I had during the national team and Olympic team competition, I got cross-checked so many times across the spine that I had to have a special pad made for the back of my shoulder pads to extend down over my spine. Tammy Shuchuk was famous for cross-checks across the spine. So yeah, I love to be in and around the net, causing trouble like a little mosquito, I think was really my style.
Wow. And so coaches must have loved that, because you weren't afraid to, put your body on the line and then do whatever it takes to score a goal. So was the average distance between where you shot the puck and went in, was it under 5 feet in terms of the goals that you scored?
I would say, yeah. I mean, I think I think if I had to categorize my goals, there was nothing highlight worthy of most of them. And that's what I try to instill in my players. Like, even in this league, in this day and age, goalies are so good. And, so many kids want to have that highlight reel goal and go bar down, but they all count 1 point no matter how they go in. And, the opportunities to score goals are really going to come from those areas around the net where you might have to battle it out and really, bury home those rebounds, because these goalies these days are really hard to score on.
Gotcha. All right, so now we're going to transition a little bit into the USA Hockey. You played for USA Hockey for a couple of World Championships before going to the Olympics. So what was that process like of qualifying for the national team? And I'm assuming, given your scoring prowess, you were kind of more of a shoo-in, like Katie King Crowley. And so, like, what was that like? How did that all happen?
That's a great question. I'm not even sure exactly how it all happened. And, my route was pretty circuitous at times. I made my first national team in '94, which was the year that I graduated from Dartmouth. And there were some tryouts and camps, and I actually don't even remember exactly the order in which things happened, but I know that I went to a tryout in late spring and then was named to that team and got a chance to compete. That was in Lake Placid, the first year that I competed in the World Championships. And there had been some other events. There was an pre-Olympic event in San Antonio, Texas, that I played in. And that was really my first opportunity that I got out on the ice with the national team players. And, you go to one of those events and you're coming out of Dartmouth with all these numbers and you feel like you're, pretty big stuff. And the first time I got on the ice for a shift against Team Canada, I think my head spun around 3 times. I had no idea which direction I was going, what I was doing. You asked me if I was fast. I felt like the game was fast and I wasn't. And, I can't tell you much more about that shift other than that I felt totally out of my league. And I hopped back on the bench and said to one of my teammates, like, oh my God, like, this is fast, and she's like, yeah, well, welcome to the big leagues. So, it was a process. It took a long time. And I think, any player who's jumping levels and, you're really strong in your respective places, and then all of a sudden you go to a new school or join a new league, there's a learning curve there that you have to be patient with yourself. And I think that's a really important lesson, and something that I took with me is that, you think you're really good until you get out there in that bigger pond, and then there's more work to do. And you either do the work or you don't, but the game's going to move on without you if you're not willing to put in the work.
And what was the number one area that you worked on that helped you stay at that level or compete at that level?
It was really, for me, it was strength and conditioning. Back then at Dartmouth, I think we lifted as a team maybe once or twice ever. It just wasn't really a thing. And, and the focus on nutrition and all of those things, I think for me were one of the building blocks that helped me get to the next level. And then just playing at that level and being willing to make mistakes and try new things and be coachable. There was a lot that I learned between, Dartmouth and the national team. There were things that, Coach Crow taught us at Dartmouth. That was certainly growth opportunity. But then, stepping up into that national team program, there was so much to learn.
Got it. So what was the experience like in Nagano? Less so the gold medal game. We'll get to that in a moment. But what was that experience heading over to Japan and then just experiencing the Olympic Games? Because I'm assuming that, like, as a kid, you never even dreamed of playing in the Olympics because it just wasn't an option at that point.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I had dreamed about playing in the NHL. Nobody told me that that wasn't possible. So, I always had big dreams, but, kind of once I got into high school, really realized that those dreams weren't possible, that there was no major opportunity. At that time, I thought college hockey was really going to be the pinnacle. And then to have that opportunity to be part of that Olympic, the first women's Olympic team, and to go to Japan and compete for a medal, that was exciting too, because typically your first year Olympic sports at that time weren't medal sports. They were exhibition. And so the fact that we were actually competing for a gold medal The first year that women's hockey was in the Olympics was really exciting. And not that we were there, for the hardware, but when you're competing at that level, you want to be competing for something. And you grow up watching the Olympics. I mean, I grew up watching the 1980 men's team. I mean, that was a huge memory for me. So, and for all of us, all of us on that team remember that moment.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the gold medal game. So we've had Katie King Crowley and Shelley Looney on the podcast, so we've kind of talked a lot about that game. But you got the first goal in the game, which was the icebreaker. So maybe just talk about that goal. I know you also assisted on Shelley Looney's goal, which she talked about on the podcast we had with her in one of our early episodes, and you got an assist on that one. But talk about that first goal and what were you thinking when that puck went in the net?
Well, when the puck went in the net, I know I felt relief, obviously joy. But I think for us, the competition with Canada was always heated. It was, we always knew that was going to be a great hockey game. And up until that game right before, so in the game right before the gold medal game, we ended up beating Canada 7-4 in the round robin game, which meant nothing. But for us, that was a pivotal moment. And so going into the gold medal game, we had a different mentality than we had really up until that point, because in every major competition up until that point, we had lost to Canada. We had come in second. And so to get the first goal in that game really just solidified our belief that we could win and kind of put any doubt that we had kind of on the back burner. And so, as an athlete, there's always those negative thoughts or, the doubt that can creep in. But for us, we were over that and we had a mission. And so, to put that first puck in the net and kind of be able to go into the locker room after the first period with the lead was a big opportunity, a big moment.
Awesome. Okay, I'm not, like I said, we've covered a lot of the territory on the women's team, but a couple things. What was it like to see your face on the box of a Wheaties cereal? I know they had a whole team shot soon after the Olympics, thanks to the Wheaties box. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, that was a totally unexpected thing, and again, the Wheaties box, when you think about Wheaties now, no, it's not really the same as it was back when we were growing up, but that was such an icon of our childhood, the Wheaties box. And so, when we were asked to be on it, it was really exciting and just kind of another great moment of just being able to celebrate women's hockey and having that platform to be able to be seen. We went into the Olympics feeling pretty invisible. Nobody really still knew that women's hockey was a sport, much less an Olympic sport. There weren't really that many girls and women playing at the time in the US. And so when we went to Japan, we were living in pretty much a bubble and a vacuum of that anybody really cared. I mean, even in college, we played in front of empty stands, with nobody in the stand. So to have that opportunity to be seen on a Wheaties box like that and know that, people were noticing was pretty exciting.
That's awesome. Okay, last question. Tell us something that no one knows about the 1998 gold medal team. So for example, Katie King Crowley talked about stopping off in Hawaii on the return flight, and that was almost as good as actually winning the gold medal, just a notch below. Any unknown stories that folks might want to hear about the team in 1998?
Oh boy, putting me on the spot. I don't know that there's any really unknown stories. I mean, one of the things that I guess I remember and value about that experience and that team, I think, is that was before there were really endorsement contracts and, opportunities to, make a ton of money, around sponsorships and things. And the thing that I remember about that team is that every single one of us had sacrificed so much along the way to even make it to that point, that it was such a special moment and opportunity to win a gold medal with that team. Because, when you sit in that locker room and look around the room and look at the leadership that we had and just the quality individuals and people who, I mean, that was a team of selfless women who just gave each other everything in order to accomplish that goal. And I think that's what makes it so special. I mean, we still all keep in touch. It went beyond just that winning the gold medal. And people ask about the gold medal and everybody wants to see the hardware. Everybody wants to see the medal. But honestly, the medal is just secondary to the entire experience that we had, and being able to give yourself over to team in that way was really something that I, value as in that experience.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. That's a great takeaway from that experience. So, moving on, you didn't play that much hockey after the Olympics. From what I can tell, you got married and started a family. So maybe talk about the time in between, the Olympics and then heading off to the Taft School in Watertown in 2013, almost 15 years. What were you doing in between?
So right after the Olympics, I got married, and my husband and I moved to California. And we lived in Salinas, California, which is the salad capital of the world, but it's not the ice hockey capital of the world. But they did have a excellent roller hockey rink not too far from where we were living. So actually, he and I joined the roller hockey league and made a ton of friends, that way when we were living out there. And then just about 2 years later, I had my first son. And so I was pretty much, hanging out, being mom for a little while. And then I had my second child about 2 years later, and eventually got back into teaching, which was my other career. And, kind of worked my way following the boys through their education. I taught 3 to 6 year olds in Montessori for a while. I taught elementary education. Actually, before that, I taught 5th grade before that. And then just kind of kept following my kids through their schooling. So eventually ended up teaching and coaching at Taft starting in 2013.
And how did that come about? And obviously, then the coaching piece probably had some appeal to you. So, what made you get back into the game?
Yeah, I guess I was always into the game. I was coaching youth hockey in the area. I was coaching for Watertown Youth Hockey, which is the town organization. My younger son was playing. My older son wanted nothing to do with hockey. My younger son was a goalie. So I was coaching, learned to skate, learned to play. I coached a Pee Wee team for a while and coached my son's team for a bit. So I always was around hockey. I was working camps and clinics and things like that, but just not as a career path at the time, more as a volunteer. And then I was coaching a couple of the Taft faculty children in that organization when the Taft job became available, and went and interviewed for that. And I'd always been a teacher, so it was kind of a natural progression to get back into teaching and coaching at Taft.
Gotcha. And if I understand correctly, you taught math as well. Is that correct?
I taught math. I did some admissions work. I was a dorm head. I coached some soccer, some lacrosse, obviously the hockey.
So here's my specific question. How does teaching math help you coach hockey? Is there any math involved in teaching hockey, specifically like angles? So
yeah, well, I'm a big fan of angling. So I didn't teach geometry, but I think that just teaching and being a teacher and knowing how kids learn, I think has helped me in the coaching realm. Being able to show kids and demonstrate and, be able to watch video and break that down and let kids see for themselves from outside their own body is super helpful. There's so much teaching that goes into hockey, and then there's just so much experience that you can only learn by doing. So, putting kids into those situations and drills and situations in practice where they can really learn and grow as a player is important.
Gotcha. So I'm just going to ask you one more question about the Taft School, but more in general. Tell me about girls prep school hockey and what it's like to compete in the New England prep school leagues, because it's not something I'm very familiar with.
Yeah, it's really competitive hockey. Kids come from all over. You have international students as well, but because most of those schools are boarding schools, and when I went to Loomis, I was a day student. Most of us were day students. The whole prep school world has changed significantly, and that league is super competitive. And you've got kids who go on to play D1 college hockey, D3 college hockey, and are significant contributors around the NCAA leagues. So highly recommended, players who are kind of stuck in their little parts of the country who maybe don't have the opportunities to play with girls or play at that competitive level certainly should be exploring New England prep schools, because, there's a school for everyone, and each school has its own characteristics and its own vibe, just like colleges. But it's a great opportunity for kids to really push themselves into a higher level hockey if they don't have that available at home.
And correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the girls, because the prep league only plays in the mid-20s, roughly speaking, number of games per year, they supplement if they're very serious about hockey by joining a club team as well. How does that work?
Yeah, so most club teams at that age group have shifted to split season models, particularly in Connecticut. There's 3 tier 1 teams that pretty much serve the prep school world. So kids are able to kind of get a balance to their schedule. Most of those teams will play on Sundays so that kids can be part of their prep school programs in the fall. Most of the prep school girls actually are also multi-sport athletes. So a lot of kids play sports in the fall and many in the spring. Sometimes you have tri-varsity athletes, you know, in that world, which is awesome. I'm a big fan of multi-sport athletes, but yeah, the club teams pretty much supplement those schedules. So during the summer, kids are playing with their club teams and have the visibility there. And then those club teams will stop playing when the prep school season starts so that kids can really focus on the prep school hockey season, which is intense. You know, they're practicing every day of the week, except for Sundays. They usually have 2 games a week. And, you know, it's a great opportunity to grow as a player.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So now let's move on to the recent announcement of you joining Post University as the women's head coach. How did that all come about?
So it's a great question. How did it all come about? It wasn't really something that I was expecting. I was pretty much at the point in my Taft career where I had stepped aside as head coach. I was ready to pass that along to a new coach. So we have Mackenzie Lancaster, who was the assistant at Conn College, coming in to take over the Taft program. So that was all pretty well set, and I was pretty much ready to just do all the rest of the things. You know, I listed all the things that prep school teachers do on campus, which is a lot. We wear a lot of hats at in the prep school world, but I was approached by Post, you know, as a available coach to maybe come and talk about the program. And, you know, it wasn't necessarily something that I was seeking, but, you know, once I sat down and started talking about the program and what that program needed, I felt like I could really make a mark there and really, you know, make a contribution based off of my experience and what I could bring to the program. And I had a chance to talk to about 6 of the players during my interview process and, you know, pretty much asked them what they wanted for their program in the future. And we were speaking the same language, you know, things like accountability, you know, love the game. They wanted to grow as players. And, you know, there were a lot of things that they were saying that I think I can bring to the table.
Gotcha. Okay, we're going to get into the actual team in just a moment, but let's just talk about the school. So it's located in Waterbury, Connecticut. It is just a smidgen over 7 miles away from the Taft School, so you probably don't have to move to take this role. And there's about 7,000 students. Why don't you just talk about the school, the academics, maybe some of the facilities for the women's hockey team, just more at the higher level about what the school's all about.
Yeah, so it's actually a really small campus. It's actually only about 1,200 students who live on campus. The students that are living on campus primarily are populating the athletic teams at Post. So it's a pretty awesome community of student athletes. And, you know, those athletes go out and support each other and, you know, get to games and really are their own best fans. So you know, the community is tight knit. You get a lot of attention from professors because the on-campus classes are small. There's a lot of, you know, Post is primarily an online school. So the numbers of students registered are actually, many of those are online students. Gotcha. But on campus itself, there are about 1,200 student athletes that live and operate on the main campus.
Gotcha. And what kind of degrees does it offer? You know, what are the strengths on the academic side?
Yeah, I mean, they offer a number of undergraduate majors. And so, you know, you can get a BA or a BS in any number of areas. But, you know, just looking down the list of what our kids are majoring in, we have a lot of business majors. We have some sports management majors, a couple biology majors, which I won't be able to help them out there, but I might be able to help some with some math in their studies. But yeah, we have a number of majors and degrees, criminal justice, child studies, you know, that really give kids a broad spectrum of possibilities for what they want to study.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then let's just talk about the hockey facilities. So I understand you don't have a rink on campus, so you have to drive a few miles away. And I think up until recently, and maybe even still, you actually share the rink with the Sacred Heart University. Is that correct? The Sports Center of Connecticut, which is a double-decker rink in Shelton, Connecticut. Do I got my information correct?
You have that correct. So we have our own locker room in the rink. So, but kids do commute down, so it gives an opportunity for kids to bond and carpool in the car on the way down to the rink. But yeah, we up until this year, we've been sharing with Sacred Heart. They'll be moving out in January. And so then we'll be, it will be primarily our own home rink, but yeah, it's a great facility. We have a great partnership with Sports Center of Connecticut, and we have great opportunities to get our practices in and get our games in with some support from the men's team and from some of the other athletes around campus that come down and support.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about the actual team. And I know you're brand new to the team, so I don't expect you to know the entire history of the Eagles program. But here's my first question. When I Googled like the address and the location of Post University, the address comes up as being on Country Club Road. So has the team been more of a country club in the past? Because they've been hanging out on Country Club Road? Like, has it been a little bit easy to play for that team and not work so hard?
I honestly don't know. I can tell you what it's going to be. And again, I go back to the conversation I had with the players just about accountability. My experience is as an athlete, and that's how I treat my kids. To be a female athlete in this day and age, there's a high bar, and I think that's great. And I think that's great for the sport. I think that's great for female athletes. So, I'm not sure what the general consensus was around campus on the team in the past, but I do know that there's a lot of kids that want to move this program forward, and a lot of talk about, building the program. And, many of these kids that I talk to, they realize that, it's going to take several years for us to get moving in the direction that they want to go. And many of them acknowledge that they'll probably graduate before this program gets to where they'd like to see it, but that they want to be a part of that build. And I think that's one of the things that I took away from the interview process, and even deciding to take the job, is I needed to hear from those players that they wanted to be a part of what I hoped to be able to develop in this program.
Gotcha, gotcha. So we've had several of the other NUHA coaches on the podcast, and they talked about how the NUHA teams are really Division II teams playing in Division I, and they with how everything works, they can qualify for the national championship. But when I look back at the history of Post University, when they were playing in the D3 schedule, they weren't a very strong team even in D3, and now you're playing a D1 schedule, even more challenging. Do you know like what the decision was to like join NUHA and play D1? Because quite frankly, the program hasn't been very strong before you get in there. So
yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, I'm not sure what the thought process was behind joining D1, but I do think that there's been a significant investment in the program since moving to D1, and progress for sure. Every year they've gotten a little bit better, and while they're not winning a ton of games now, I think that there's great potential there to, kind of build and be able to slowly make gains in the league. And, and I think for NUHA being a fairly new league, I think it's a great opportunity for all of these schools to really make their mark. And, for the league to be playing for an NCAA bid this year, I think is a huge step forward. And, there's so many women's programs that have started up in the past. Back when I was looking at colleges, there really weren't many options. There were the Ivies, and then there was UNH, Providence, and Northeastern. So the fact that there are so many opportunities for women to play now, I think is a great tribute to, the history of the sport and the growth that it's made every year.
yeah, and not so great for you, but NUHA is expanding. So you're going to have two more competitive teams, Stonehill College starting this fall with Tara Watchorn. And then just a few weeks ago, Assumption College announced that they're going to be having a team for 2023. So it's going to be even tougher. So, this past year, the only NUHA team that Post was able to beat was actually St. Michael's College, which if you could play them every game, you probably do have a pretty good record. But unfortunately, there are other teams that they played against. So what's your vision for the team to get it to be highly competitive in NUHA?
I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about is just mental strength, mental preparation, being able to give yourself over to team. I kind of tap into what I valued most about that US team way back when. And, playing on a team, playing hockey, it's hard. It can be a grind at times. And, just helping these kids to stay fresh and stay excited about the game and, work together and be able to build something bigger than themselves. So, I hope to bring, good drills and practice time, opportunities for video and really mental skills, mental training, and really just being able to tap into their best selves. It's a process, and to be an elite athlete requires consistency, and to play consistently, you have to understand how to prepare, both mentally and physically. So my players are working hard in the off season, doing their off ice training, which is key to helping us move forward right from the start in the fall. And hopefully, myself and my assistant coach can bring a structure and kind of a direction for this team to buy into and get on board with.
Gotcha. So you're saying that there's going to be more than one or two weight room sessions over the course of the season in your new capacity.
Absolutely. Strength and conditioning is a whole new beast now, but not back when I was not back in the early 90s. There was nothing to strength and conditioning.
I gotcha. Okay. So you just alluded to it. Tell me where you're at with your the staff. At least on the website, there's no assistant coaches listed on the team. But I think you just mentioned that you already have one on board. Maybe tell us where you're at with your assistant coaches and what the plan is.
Yeah, so I have a part-time assistant that was hired recently. She'll hopefully be listed on the website soon, but her name is Alison Rothke. She graduated from Quinnipiac a couple years ago. She's also been in education, so she's been around doing her practicum work in elementary education. And it's been a tough couple of years in education with COVID. So I think she's ready to try something a little bit different and is really excited to share her love of the game with these athletes. So I think the two of us are going to make a great team, at coaching these kids and helping to get this program moving in the right direction.
Gotcha. And then where are you at with recruiting for whether it's this fall, next 2023, and then obviously the 2024 is just a few weeks ago, then started to be able to talk to colleges directly?
Yeah, so right now we've got 7 new players coming in the door in the fall, which is exciting. I don't know a ton about, the players coming in, but, I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing about their abilities and, and their character, which is super important. I'm excited to work with kids that want to be coached, and it sounds like I've got a good group of kids coming in. And now we're getting to work trying to round out a class of 23. So really that's our focus right now, is working on our class of 23 and also getting a chance to look at some 24s and start those conversations. So, a lot of phone conversations, a lot of kids, getting to know Post and getting to know where we're headed and, hopefully getting excited about what they might be able to bring to our program.
Gotcha. And what characteristics are you looking for when you're recruiting?
Because I'm 5'2", I have a love for players of all sizes. So, I know in this day and age, Division I is really focused on the bigger player, but I do, I see a lot of details, and, I'm a big detail person when I watch a hockey player. So I love to see the little things. I love to see, somebody taking care of all of the smaller aspects of the game that maybe sometimes go unnoticed, the unsung hero types of plays. I love a forward that's a great back checker that breaks up plays. That was one of the things that I prided myself on, especially at those higher levels. I came out of Dartmouth being a top goal scorer, and then I had to change my game a little bit when I went to the national team. It's just harder to score goals, and that wasn't going to be my game. So I really had to redefine myself into a different type of player. And, that's what I look for. I look for versatility. I look for kids who have good hockey IQ, and I want to know that they're coachable. So, reaching out to coaches and other people who know these kids and finding out what kind of person they are and whether they really want to learn and grow and contribute to a team atmosphere is really important.
Gotcha. And for the record, you're being modest. You actually scored quite a few goals with the national team. So
Well,
I did see the numbers.
eventually I did, but that's one of those things that eventually takes care of itself. But when I first joined the national team, like I said, there was a lot of growth that had to happen, and I couldn't hang my hat on being a 50 goal scorer in these games, because that just wasn't going to happen. So being able to find the smaller victories that aren't necessarily showing up on a score sheet is a really important aspect of the game and growing as a player. You know what I mean? Kids want to be able to post everything on Instagram with highlight reels, but a lot of the plays are not highlight worthy, but they're just as important. And I think that's key to being an all-around great hockey player, is understanding that, your identity isn't wrapped up in what you can put on Instagram.
Amen to that. All right. So just a couple more questions. One is a recruiting related question. So in 4 years, I know you can't predict the future, but what percentage of your team will be from Taft or Loomis Chaffee?
That's a great question. I don't know. I would love to have some of those kids, but we'll see. Our post campus is a little bit smaller than the Taft and Loomis campus, so we'll see. See if we can entice some of those kids over.
Gotcha. So we're into kind of the summer recruiting process. Are you going to be at events this summer where you're going to be looking at kids? So for example, by the time this airs, I'll probably actually already be in the Boston area, but there's quite a few showcases and tournaments at the end of July. So are you heading out on the road and heading to the arenas and taking your notebook with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a couple of weeks, Beantown kicks off, and then there's quite a few camps and tournaments and showcases. So yeah, my sister and I will pretty much be out and about, from next week onward, really trying to get a chance to see kids in person. It's great that you can see kids on video, but there's so much that you can't see. And, kids send you highlight reels, which is great. It's very helpful to give you at least a basic understanding of them as a player. But like I said, I want to see all those details play out in a game. So being able to see kids in person and get to those events is really important. So we'll be out and about, taking a look and writing down a lot of notes, and hopefully just getting to know kids and giving them a chance to take a look at post and see if it's a fit. Like I said, it's all about the kids' process, and I know there's a lot of recruiting that happens and a lot of pressure that kids feel, but that's not my style. I tell kids all the time that it's their process, it's not mine. And so I think that's a really important takeaway for kids, watching this, is you have to do your research, get on campuses, talk to coaches, and really find the program that's going to fit and where they feel like they can make their contributions, because 4 years goes by really quickly and you want to make the most of it.
Well, you just stole my last question, which is what advice do you have for players? So now I don't need to ask that question. All right. So my last question will be, how can folks reach out to you, get on your radar? What's the best way to let them know that they're interested in post-university?
Yeah, I love to hear from kids directly. And so, I usually encourage kids to send me an email. It's gsilverman@post.edu. So I'm sure you'll have that on the link afterwards. But, I love to hear from kids and get to know them, and, have them tell me where I can see them play. So, video is great. And I love, kids to send me a little bit of video. Full shifts is super helpful. Highlight reels are great, but having a couple full shifts to get to see, the well-rounded game of a player is really helpful. And then just being able to know where and when we can see them play.
Perfect. And at the end of this podcast, I'll be telling some folks about how they can do that very easily using a nice tool I've heard of. But separate to that, I really want to thank you, Gretchen, for coming on the podcast. It was great hearing about your amazing hockey career, especially the Gordie Howe story. That really stands out to me. And thank you for telling us about your coaching career. And I really want to wish you the best of luck at Post. Definitely be paying attention to your games this year and seeing how things go in your rookie season as coach there.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. It was great to be on, and hopefully we'll be getting a few more wins this year than last. So little improvement every day.
I really want to thank Gretchen for coming on the podcast. If you want to learn more about the Post Women's program or connect with Gretchen, you can find links to the team website and Gretchen's Champs app profile in the show notes. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Before you go, I wanted to share more about the app in Champs app. If you've listened to this podcast before, I spend a lot of time talking with coaches, parents, and players about the hockey recruiting process. One of the key questions that people want to know is, how does a player get noticed by college coaches? While there are many ways to be discovered, the easiest way to get on a college's radar is to send a coach an email and provide them all the information they need to assess if you are a player worth keeping their eyes on. That's where the app part of Champs app comes in. Champs app was designed based on all the conversations and feedback we received about the recruiting process, and we've built a tool to help players and coaches connect with a ton of the information they want to know. It all starts with creating a free, beautiful Champs app profile. After that, there's some pretty magical things that can happen to help make the recruiting process a little less overwhelming. Your Champs app profile includes all the basic academic, personal, and athletic information coaches want to know. Then, by including video, schedule information, and your coach's contact details, colleges can easily start their evaluation process. You just copy and paste your personalized link and send it to coaches so they can see your public player profile without even having to log in or create a Champs app account. Or you can connect directly with coaches on Champs app. More and more coaches are creating their own Champs app profiles and connecting with players themselves every day. Now coaches can have all the information they need to assess where you might fit in their recruiting plans. Even better, college coaches can track your progress throughout the winter and showcase seasons, because as you make changes to your profile, coaches will get notified to your updates. And in the future, we will be adding even more amazing features to improve your visibility to the recruiting process and hopefully increase your odds of success. If you want to see what a player or coach profile looks like before you start your own, look in the show notes to see some examples. My kids and I have used Champs app for their recruiting process. In fact, my son was invited to a AAA tryout thanks to his Champs app profile. So go to www.champs.app and start your player or coach profile. It only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete most of your key information. Good luck, and please let us know how it helped with your recruiting journey.